Ah, the moon is just so delightful in binoculars, and I can see those craters and mountains on my moon map here. Hey, everybody. I'm Stargazer Mark, and thank you for joining Stay Curious to stay a little star curious today at the American Space Museum, as we like bringing you once a week on Mondays a little bit of star curious, like I said, about backyard astronomy, things you can see from your own backyard, even in a light polluted suburbs. And of course, the moon is certainly one of them. A photo I took of the moon last fall with some birds flying by it there. You can't make that up. What a nice opportunity there. And when you photograph the moon, just a hint, make sure you see the Maria, the dark areas, so it just doesn't look like a flashlight uh, beaming in the sky. And that takes a little bit of finesse with your digital camera, but you'll figure it out. Always good to have a moon map nearby. And we have a full moon this week. In fact, this is the Paschal moon, they call it. This determines the day of Easter, which Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon that occurs after the first day of spring, which is usually March 21st or 20th. So this is the first full moon we have after March 21st. And the next day, the full moon is Saturday. So the next day is Easter Sunday. That's how that all works out there. But a full moon always reminds me of my favorite moonshines. Of seeing the moon in the sky, it always excites me because one, I can eat a bunch of moon pies, okay, and have my may start talking about astronomy mug with me as I'm staying nice and cozy underneath the beautiful moonlight. Remember, it's the kind of moonshine that you can't get too much of. But I've always had a fascination with the moon since a kid, growing up in the 60s, mostly probably because of the moon race with the Soviet Union. And I have no memories of not growing up with a telescope and looking at the moon. So over the decades have been some favorite things that I've always talked about the moon, and I'm going to share some of those with you today, as well as we'll end by talking a little bit about the woman in the moon. You've heard of the man in the moon, but stay tuned, and Stargazer Mark here is going to show you the woman in the moon. Well, maybe I could attribute my early interest in astronomy in the moon to this man. That's right, Walt Disney. And that allows me to say hi to Marty Winkle, my co producer, and working the Streamlabs computer here. Marty, you certainly got your fill of Walt Disney and the Tomorrowland episodes. You remember those shows, don't you? Sunday night, we'd all be watching. I think this came on before Ed Sullivan, and then Ed Sullivan, and the the television was a piece of furniture with legs on it, and sometimes we had a radio and a record player in the same configuration there. But I attribute this guy had to subliminally got me hooked on astronomy and looking at the moon. After all, there's Walt Disney with this gigantic moon behind him. Okay, how could you not get enraptured by that? But a couple things I love about the moon is it's never the same. All right, the shadows along the Terminator. Nothing to do with Arnold Schwarzenegger, okay? The Terminator is that line between night and day. That's where the strong shadows are. Well, where's our Terminator on Earth? That's right, it's morning and evening, the twilight. If we could look at the Earth from space at twilight, morning time, or evening time, you'd see that our Terminator's right over wherever you live. And the shadows are long and appealing to us. The whole scene is more appealing in the early evening or early morning than it is during the broad daylight when shadows are coming straight down. Same as with the full moons, quite boring to look at, as opposed to the other phases when there's always beautiful craters to see and mountains along the Terminator. Well, another thing I like about the moon is nope, it's not a four-letter word. Okay, here's the moonrise I took over the Radisson Hotel that's over Melbourne there, Satellite Beach area. Though serious stargazers find moonlight washing out their nebula and galaxies and other deep sky wonders that they like to photograph, I've learned to embrace the moon and not put my telescope up when it's out, turn my telescope towards it instead. And spending an hour or so at the eyepiece with a moon map, like I have here, identifying each charted feature, can really be an amazing journey of the mind, okay? Because there's a lot of historical figures on the moon that we'll talk about, but the moon is also, here's a very beautiful moon book uh, that is kind of hard to find, Atlas of the Moon by Anton Ruckel. If you can find this book, buy it because they're worth $100 now or more. But there's some beautiful maps in here that I can look and see what is along the terminator and appeals to me to look at. In over an hour, you can actually see the shadows change on the moon as it's moving 2,000 miles an hour eastward. The moon actually moves its own diameter every hour to the left or to the east. It moves a half a degree every hour. So in a 24-hour period, it goes 12.5 degrees to the left or east in the sky. So, but a lot of us astronomers don't observe much during the moon, and I turn my telescope towards it because I like making sketches. And here's a sketch made by, who made these sketches? The great Galileo in 1609 with a telescope that is even inferior to what these binoculars are. These are 8-power binoculars, and many of you have 7 by 35s, 8 by 40s. These are 8 by 60s. The opening and for the lens is 60 millimeters. But I can see the moon just fine, better than what Galileo saw in these pictures he sketched 400 years ago. And I love sketching the moon. This is a sketch I made of the moon a few years back. That is the Sea of Rainbows, Mare Iridium, okay? And so the features on the moons have lots of history because cartographers name them. The dark seas are named in Latin after human emotions, like the Sea of Crisis, the Ocean of Storms. Okay, there's the dark areas. The Sea of Crisis in the upper right-hand corner, the oval. Sea of Serenity is below that. And also, the moon's names are named after politicians and great leaders. Here's a whole area of the moon that just looks like a mishmash of mountains and craters, but then you put names on them. And those are the Apennine Mountains. They're 15,000 feet tall. The Sea of Vapors, okay? You've got the Central Bay, Mare Meridiani. There's a crater called Trisonecker, all right? Menelaus was a Greek philosopher, or Roman philosopher named Menelaus there, 25-mile diameter crater, you see, Mark. And up at the top is the Putrid Marsh, the Sea of Decay, putridus in Latin. So once you kind of get familiar with the moon, it's like getting yourself familiar with the constellations at night when the moon's not out. You learn the different, the bright constellation stars that give you sort of the dot outline, and then you learn the fainter stars. Well, same way with the moon becomes a familiar place to you if you take a moon map and just take the time to spend an hour, a half hour, learning a couple of the craters. And then the next night they won't look so prominent, and 2 nights later you won't recognize them because it's almost noon over them. And then they'll cycle back around a month later, and you put your telescope out and you go, oh, there's Menelaus, okay? Archimedes is the one up there at the upper left towards the Marsh of Decay. And of course, there's 6 places on the moon where humans have walked on, and that's so interesting to think about. Here is the Apollo 15 landing site, seen in a full moon picture there, that you could go out and look tonight and look up and say, oh, the top northern part of the moon is where Apollo 15 landed, in that little curve where there's a sea there, and that's the Sea of Rains. And you see in the close-up photo, there's an actual like meandering dried up river rill. It was actually a lava rill, and there's a blue dot there, Marty, and that's where Apollo 15 landed, all right? And you could see this pretty good in a backyard telescope, depending on how big a telescope you have. But it humanizes in a real way that humans were on the moon to look at a spot and realize, wow, that's right where they landed that Apollo 15 lunar module, LM9, right, Marty? I think it was LM9, 15. Marty's going to do add that up for me there. Am I right? No, 5 was 11, 6 was 12, 7 was 13, 8 was 14, and that'd been 10 because they used 9 didn't have a bay for Lunar Module in there. We love thinking about that minutia in there.
You have a bay for the rover.
Yes, they had to make room for the rover, and LM10 didn't have a bay in there, so LM11 did. They made it so, right?
9 didn't.
9 didn't. That's right. They made it for 10. Excuse. Anyway, we're getting way off the course here, but isn't it so cool to argue with Marty about not argue. We're trying to figure out what lunar module it was because he was inside that lunar module that landed right there where that blue dot is on Hadley Rill. They popped over Hadley Mountain to do it. What an amazing, my favorite landing video of all. But you know, many scientists, Marty, of the 17th and 18th centuries, meaning the 1600s and 1700s, even in the 1800s, thought it perfectly normal to consider the moon inhabited by intelligent creatures. Even the great astronomer William Herschel, who discovered Uranus in 1781, he thought for sure that the moon was inhabited by intelligent beings, and he said so in the front pages of the London Times. He was frustrated that his telescope couldn't show cities on the moon, all right? They weren't clear about whether there was an atmosphere on the moon or not, but certainly by the 1800s they could figure that out. So thinking of the moon in history, From Earth to the Moon, Jules Verne, another classic, great story and a great movie. And to look at the moon is to look at a world that we've thought about and been mesmerized about. And it's fun to be a photographer like myself. Another photograph that I took. No trick photography here. I just had like a 300 millimeter lens and a beautiful structure of a electrical tower. And I had to drive my car to the right spot and get out and frame the moon like that. And I distinctly remember and kind of doing a U-turn in the car to make this picture. And so glad I did because it's kind of an interesting picture and another one of my crazy lunacy photos. But you can always take your finger and cover up that moon with your little tiny finger outstretched. That's a 1/2 degree of the sky. And though we've talked about the moon illusion and how big the moon looks next to a tower like here, or a building, or I think I got another example here of a moon illusion. The moon going over the Hancock County Courthouse in my hometown of Findlay, Ohio. And Marty, what time does it say? It must be 5 o'clock somewhere. Yep. And there's the moon, not a superimposed image, an actual one single frame shot exposed to get those dark maria on that lunar surface there. But you can always cover it up with your little finger, 1/2 degree. So if you know geometry, 90 degrees to directly overhead from the horizon. So that's right, you can stack 180 degrees end to end to end from horizon to overhead directly, and then another 180 degrees. It's so small covering the sky, but it's so big in our minds. At 2,120 miles across and an average of 2,500 miles away, it's just a 1/2 degree across. Ironically, the same size as our sun, that's 800,000 miles across and 93 million miles away. They are a 1/2 degree across and covered up so neatly in an eclipse. It's unbelievable.
Is there something wrong with your math? You said 180 degrees this way, 180 degrees that way. That's 360 degrees.
180 moons, I'm sorry,
Okay.
could go, right. 180 degrees from horizon to horizon would encompass 360 moons. Thank you, Marty. 90 degrees overhead, all right, would have 180 moons from the horizon to 100, and then another 180 moons. Incredible to think about. But yet, go out and you'll think the moon is so big, put your telescope on it. Even if you have one of those little bargain box telescopes, go find it in the closet. Tell the spiders to get away. You're going to use it for a couple nights. Clean it up in the daytime. Put the highest number eyepiece, like 25 millimeter, in there and line up your finder scope, and you'll enjoy a little bit of moonshine looking at the craters and along the terminator of the moon tonight and the rest of the week. Well, as bright as the full moon looks, okay, it's really a poor reflector, Marty. It only sends back 17% of the light that hits it, which is like a lump of coal. They call that albedo, is a scientific word for measuring what bounces off reflective back. The Earth's albedo is well over like 70% because of our oceans. Venus's albedo is almost 90% because it's like a mirror reflecting back the sunlight off of those cloud tops of Venus. But the moon's albedo is about the same as a asphalt. Okay. In fact, the well-worn asphalt highway is about the same gray color as the thick surface dust on the moon. It just looks bright to us. Now, there I have a list of about 100 songs with the word moon in the theme. Here's one, Moon Shadow, Cat Stevens, on a 45 record player. From David Bowie's Moon Age Daydream to Van Morrison's Moon Dance to Yellow Moon by the Neville Brothers to Cornbread Moon by Joe Ely. How about Kentucky Moon by bluegrass picker? Said that too quick, from Kentucky. So check how many moon songs can you think about? Just start jotting them down there.
What was the first song played on the moon?
What was the first song played on the moon, Marty says. And I don't know, what was it?
Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra.
Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra. There's a good one. That deserves a bite of a moon pie, Marty. Under the moonlit skies here, a little bit of moon pie. All right. Yep, Fly Me to the Moon, one of my favorites too, by the chairman of the board, Frank. Well, I can't talk with that moon pie in my mouth. All right. There are a lot of websites. There are apps you can download. And a lot of them show you all of the objects that we landed on the moon. Okay? That's fun to see. In green are the unmanned landing, and blue, and yellow are the manned landings. When you see we have the 6 lunar landings of Apollo, and then we've got the 4 surveyor landings, that's 10, and then you've got the Lunas or the Russians. The Russians landed about a half a dozen unmanned spacecraft that lasted some for a couple years actually on the moon. And don't forget, there's no dark side of the moon, there's a back side of the moon. And on the back side of the moon is a little Russian rover called U2, and it has been roving for about almost 3 years, I believe. A little over 2 years, maybe. So, the moon rocks here that you see from Apollo 11, and they're named, all right? Those grids are just 2 millimeters, so these are pebbles you're looking at. There's what they call basalt, that is the lava that got coated with the micrometeorites, all right? And the feldspathic breccia or breccia are mixed up, 5 or 6 different types of rocks that have been fused together. So as we look at this, it comes to mind, what does the moon smell like? What kind of cheese does the moon smell like? Limburger cheese, Swiss cheese, Asiago? What do you think out there, Marty? Well, when the astronauts took their helmets off inside their spacecraft, they smelled the moon. The dirt was on their spacesuits, on their gloves, and all of the 12 astronauts on the moon were generally in agreement with one that it smelled just like burnt gunpowder or ashes in a fireplace, all right? And that makes sense. Let me have a sip there. Because the violent impacts of the meteors of all sizes on the moon over its 4.5 billion year history. Now, there are many strange properties of the moon soil, okay? It's finer than talcum powder, so it's going to get into everything, all right? It was formed by micrometeorite impacts, which pulverized local rocks into fine particles. And a micrometeorite is like a dust mote going at 30,000 miles an hour. When it hits something, it's going to leave a little microscopic crater. And we see these all over the International Space Station when they bring back handrails and so forth. They, in fact, make little burrs that they have to that cut some of the gloves, so they've always got to inspect the gloves. Another strange property about the lunar soil is the energy from these constant collisions, because there's no atmosphere on the moon, melts the dirt into vapor that cools and condenses on soil particles, coating them with a glassy shell. So the particles can wreak havoc on spacesuit and other equipment, and also the astronauts found that they slid a little bit on their moon boots. So they're going to have more of a hexagonal pattern instead of just the famous bar pattern of the moon boots, that they actually would slip a little bit like on glass because of the glass microscopic globules that are in the moon dirt. That the moon's dirt is called regolith. So some gloves and boots had layers stripped off by the abrasiveness of the moon. And there's also magnetic iron in it. All right. So that plays into when we go back to the moon. And here's what we look like going back to the moon with Elon Musk's spaceship. Sure looks like the one that Wells or one of the other science fiction guys thought up there. But that's what's got the bid to take us back to the moon right there. Elon Musk's starship that he hopes to orbit by the end of this year. So also couple interesting facts. Another interesting fact is man on the moon, the newspapers to prove it, okay? Here we go. And we always like to point out that this newspaper, the photographs in it, this 52-year-old newspaper, coming up on 53 years old in just a couple months, 1969. These photos were taken by news photographers off of television screens, because we did not see these actual photos from the surface until the Apollo 11 guys got back and they processed the film. They brought back about 97 photos, okay, from their moonwalks. And I think I was going to read here, they took 47 pounds of rock, 97 photos in their Hasselblad 70 millimeter camera. All right. And we had about almost 2 hours of the moonwalk live on video. That is what these are taken off of, including the President Nixon talking to him on the moon there. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind there. Live in infamous memory there. So love showing you the impact, but it was a week almost after the Apollo astronauts got back that they saw the film, and then maybe 2 weeks later the general public saw it in the beautiful magazines like Life and Look and Newsweek and Time and all the other journals that would do special publications for it. So, well, Marty, there's enough moonshine for you today. Actually, you're going to bring me over some of our lunatics that are watching the show today. All right. I'll bet Carlton Bailey's one of them. No, Carlton's not there. Ophelia Sauterel, thank you for watching, Ophelia, in Normandy, France. And Chalid Zan, thank you for watching. Dave Stange is watching, probably going to get a telescope out. Thank you, Keith Sewell. Professor Sewell has given us stars before. He's on top of, there is some proposal here on the Space Coast to bring a planetarium back. Thank you, Keith, for sharing that with me. We'll see how that goes. Larry Pushkar, hope things are warming up and you have some spring flowers up there in Michigan. Tom and Mark Usiak, hey guys, good to see you. And I'll pick up the phone, catch up with you guys this week. Cynthia Rossi's watching, and Christopher Mick. Christopher Mick is back in Wisconsin, had a big time out there at the Space Symposium. I saw the pictures you posted, Christopher, of the Space Symposium out there in Colorado. And he's an educator there in the Hudson, Wisconsin area. So we're all so glad that you're watching us. Staying curious today with a little bit of Star Curious. And I just wanted to keep you further curious with what Mark say about that woman in the moon, Marty? Yeah, there's a full moon picture that I took a while back, and there's a woman in the moon. Let me outline you for her. You heard of the man in the moon. Now, all ancient cultures thought of that these dark areas represented something to them. And there's a bunny in the moon where the bunny tail is the upper right there. That is the Sea of Crisis. But I contend I always see the profile of a woman in the moon. And I think it's Lucille Ball. That's why I made her a redhead there, Marty. See, there's the side view, the profile of the woman in the moon. She's got a beautiful pendant around her neck, gold jewelry there, Tycho, the crater there at the southern hemisphere where we're going to land Artemis. And there's the Artemis landing ship there. And we don't get triple T off there. Go back there. And there's the woman in the moon. Blue-eyed, red lipstick, red hair. Yep, that's Lucille Ball, all right. So now hopefully you'll look at the full moon a little bit different or consider that I am just a lunatic. So anyway, thank you all for watching Stay Curious today, being Star Curious. We have got a great week ahead, so be sure and watch that. And thank you all for chiming in. Marty, we have anything else to take care of as I get back waiting for the sun to come out? I forgot one other thing. Oh, yeah. I got my Charlie Duke moon globe with me here. Meant to mention that. Thank you, Mr. Charlie Duke, for autographing my moon globe many years ago there. And this is an old moon globe that the backside of the moon doesn't even have any craters named on it. So wanted to show that off as a way of thanking you all for staying star curious on Stay Curious here at the American Space Museum. And until the next time I see you, I'm Marquette, and we will do some stargazing again to bridge the space between us.